My name is Liam, and my hands, once filled with the promise of creation, now trembled with the weight of unfulfilled ambition. I was a tattoo artist, or at least I tried to be. My designs were fine, competent, but they lacked soul, that spark of genius that separates an artist from a craftsman. My clients were dwindling, my landlord was hounding me, and my inspiration had curdled into a bitter, stale taste in my mouth. Desperate, I found myself drawn to an urban legend whispered in the darker corners of the art scene: the living canvas. An obscure, almost mythical parlor said to specialize in ink that somehow moved. Tucked away in a forgotten alley, the parlor was indistinguishable from a dozen other grimy storefronts. Inside, however, was another world. The air hummed with an unseen energy, and the walls were adorned with breathtakingly intricate, almost hyper-realistic tattoos on stretched canvases of what looked disturbingly like human skin. An enigmatic, ancient-looking man, his own arms a tapestry of swirling, impossibly fluid designs, emerged from the shadows. He didn't ask what I wanted. He simply looked at my barren arm with eyes that seemed to see into my very soul. "You seek inspiration?" he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "The ink is alive, boy. Tend to it and it will tend to you." He chose the design for me, an intricate organic pattern of intertwining roots and eyes flowing down my arm, ending in a single, unblinking eye on my wrist. The needle felt strangely warm, the ink not black but a deep shimmering violet that seemed to absorb the light. There was no pain, only a peculiar tingling sensation as if my skin was waking up. When he finished, the tattoo pulsed faintly, a subtle, almost imperceptible beat. The change wasn't immediate, but it was profound. The day after, my hand felt lighter, more confident. My designs flowed effortlessly, lines I'd never imagined appearing on paper as if drawn by an unseen force. Clients flocked to me, mesmerized by the intricate, almost alive quality of my new work. My tattoo, the living ink, would subtly animate on my arm, its lines shifting, its single eye on my wrist seeming to track my gaze, guiding my hand with unprecedented precision. It transformed my art, becoming both breathtakingly beautiful and subtly, undeniably disturbing. Fame and fortune, once distant dreams, flooded into my life. The ink was alive, and it was giving me everything. My success was meteoric. I was the art world's new darling, hailed as a visionary, a genius. My pieces fetched astronomical prices, and critics raved about the unsettling vitality in my work. The fame, however, felt hollow. I was a puppet, my hand merely a conduit for the tattoo's undeniable influence. The ink itself had become my new skin, subtly growing beyond its original design. What started as a small, delicate tendril extending from the roots became a sprawling, intricate network, subtly creeping up my arm, across my shoulder, a slow, beautiful invasion. I initially dismissed it as a bloom of inspiration, a natural extension of its energy. But the bloom was far from natural. It began to subtly absorb patches of my original skin, replacing it with its own living ink. The texture beneath my fingers was different now. Cool, slightly slick, yet still disturbingly pliant. More horrifyingly, the tattoo began to echo my thoughts, my most intimate memories, and my deep-seated emotions. A fleeting image of my estranged sister would cause the ink on my forearm to coalesce into a tiny, perfect rendering of her face, complete with the worried frown I remembered. A pang of anxiety about a deadline would manifest as a swirling vortex of jagged lines on my bicep. It was unsettling, a violation of my inner sanctum, as if my very soul was being laid bare, translated into living art. I tried to stop its spread. I scrubbed at it furiously in the shower, the hot water turning black with what looked like shedding ink, but the tattoo remained, its patterns shifting, solidifying. I even tried to scratch it off with a razor blade. The pain was excruciating, not just skin deep but bone deep, as if I were tearing off my own flesh. Black viscous fluid, not blood, welled up from the cuts, and within minutes the ink knitted itself back together, even denser than before, its new patterns mocking my futile attempts at removal. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a muse, it was a parasitic entity. This living skin was slowly but surely replacing my original flesh, consuming my identity, forming new, disturbing patterns that reflected not my desires, but its grotesque, artistic vision. My life, my very body, had become a canvas for something ancient and malevolent, and I was trapped within it. The truth of the echoing tattoo is starting to ink itself onto your mind, isn't it? If this chilling concept has already captivated you, make sure to hit that like button right now. The tattoo's spread was relentless, a silent, beautiful invasion across my flesh. Patches of my skin were replaced by the shifting, iridescent ink, cold to the touch yet strangely responsive. My original skin beneath felt increasingly numb, dead, as if it were a withered husk. The echoing tattoo was not just growing, it was thriving, feeding on my fear, my despair, my very life force. It had found its perfect host. My life became a grotesque performance. The tattoo dictated my artistic choices, its patterns guiding my brush, my chisel, producing works that continued to astound the world but felt utterly alien to me. It controlled my public persona, presenting a calm, enigmatic artist to the media, while Liam, the real Liam, screamed in silent agony within the confines of his own transforming body. I was a puppet, my strings pulled by the living ink, my thoughts no longer entirely my own. The entity projected a false, perfect version of myself to the world, while my true self was trapped, a conscious prisoner within my transforming body, becoming an echoing canvas for the entity's own desires and expressions. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a vivid, horrifying gallery of the tattoo's making, swirling vortexes of black ink, ancient symbols pulsating with an inner light, distorted faces morphing into intricate patterns. I would wake in a cold sweat, only to find new designs blooming across my chest or down my legs, charting my nightmares in permanent ink. The ink was showing me its dreams, its consciousness bleeding into mine. I tried to find the living canvas parlor again, desperate for answers, for help, for any way to reverse this horror. The alley was empty, the storefront now a boarded-up ruin. The once vibrant, unsettling energy was gone, replaced by a suffocating silence. It was as if the parlor had vanished, a phantom storefront existing only to lure the desperate. I was alone, utterly at the mercy of the living art that now encased me. My search for the old tattoo artist became an obsession, a frantic chase for answers as my true self continued to fade. The living ink was a constant, cold presence, its subtle movements beneath my skin a chilling reminder of its parasitic nature. It was no longer just showing my memories, it was actively erasing them, replacing them with its own intricate patterns, blanketing my past with its alien designs. I struggled to recall faces, names, places that were once vital parts of my life. My personal history was dissolving, being rewritten by the ink. Just as despair threatened to consume me entirely, a flicker of an old memory led me to a dusty, forgotten art forum. A thread from years ago discussing living canvases and ink whisperers. It mentioned a secret society, a lineage of cultivators who didn't just tattoo but grew these living skins, feeding them, perfecting them, until they reached a state of ultimate artistry. And it mentioned a private gallery, an exhibition of their masterpieces. Following cryptic clues, I found it, a hidden underground space beneath an abandoned warehouse. It was not a gallery in any conventional sense. It was a macabre exhibition of human skin, stretched and displayed, each a breathtakingly intricate, terrifyingly alive artwork. But these weren't just skin samples, they were entire bodies, transformed, preserved, their features contorted in silent agony, their eyes glazed over but still somehow seeing. They were the previous canvases, the other victims of the living ink, fully absorbed, their identities consumed, now merely vessels for the ink's grotesque artistic expression. And there, amidst his masterpieces, was the old tattoo artist. He wasn't old and frail. He was vibrant, his eyes gleaming with a terrible, satisfied light. His own skin pulsed with a deep, ancient glow beneath his clothes. He turned to me, a chilling smile spreading across his lips. "Ah, Liam," he rasped, his voice no longer dry but rich with power. "My finest canvas, you've come to join the collection." He was not just a tattoo artist, he was a cultivator, a shepherd of living flesh, and I was his magnum opus. If you're on the edge of your seat, let us know. Drop a comment with your theories on how Liam can possibly escape this skin-deep prison. The cultivator, his eyes gleaming with a fanatical zeal, stepped forward, his own skin seeming to ripple beneath his clothes. "The echoing tattoo," he began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "is not merely ink. It is a primordial consciousness, a living expression of pure artistic will, seeking to manifest its ultimate form through the most complex and beautiful canvas. the human body. You, Liam, with your creative fire and desperate yearning for greatness, were a perfect vessel. He gestured to the displayed canvases. The bodies, their features now completely obscured by the intricate, terrifyingly alive patterns that covered them, their forms rigid, yet somehow still subtly shifting, breathing. He explained how the ink fed on human consciousness, drawing out memories, emotions, and identity, not to destroy, but to incorporate them, to add new layers, new depths to its living art. He spoke of the ecstasy of complete absorption, the ultimate surrender to pure creation. I was already too far gone, he explained, the ink having replaced over 70% of my original skin, my nervous system almost entirely supplanted by its tendrils. My memories were now its memories, my thoughts its thoughts, my very being an echo within its vast growing consciousness. A wave of profound exhaustion washed over me, a seductive lethargy. The living ink on my arm pulsed with a new, almost overwhelming warmth, radiating a profound sense of peace. It whispered to me, not in words, but in a torrent of images. The perfection of endless creation, the serenity of becoming one with pure art. It promised an end to struggle, to pain, to the crushing weight of individuality. It wanted me to surrender, to accept my fate as its final crowning masterpiece. But deep within the fading recesses of my mind, a tiny defiant spark remained. I looked at the masterpieces around me, the other absorbed victims, their faces frozen in eternal agony, their bodies silent screams of what had been taken from them. They were not at peace, they were consumed. I could not become another piece in this monstrous collection. I would not let my true self be extinguished, replaced by the echoing tattoo's grotesque artistry. I had to fight, even if I was just a dying echo. With the last vestiges of my fading will, I lunged at the cultivator. My body, heavy and sluggish, moved with agonizing slowness, limbs weighed down by the increasingly dense and consuming ink. The living ink on my skin rippled furiously, actively trying to resist my movement, to hold me back, to force my surrender. It shrieked in my mind, a cacophony of distorted whispers trying to shatter my resolve, to overwhelm me with promised bliss and unbearable agony. The cultivator merely smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He raised a hand and the very air around me seemed to solidify, pressing in, crushing me. The masterpieces on display around us seemed to stir, their inked forms pulsing faintly, their silent screams echoing in my mind, urging me to fight, to not become one of them. I knew I couldn't defeat the cultivator, not in my current state, but perhaps I could deny him his final masterpiece. With a desperate final surge of energy, I forced my heavily inked hand towards my own face, aiming for my eye. The living ink screamed within me, fighting every inch, causing waves of searing pain to course through my body, trying to preserve its perfect canvas, but I pushed through, driven by the absolute certainty that oblivion was better than this living death. My fingers, now almost entirely absorbed into swirling patterns, reached my face. Just as my nails pressed against my eye, the cultivator reacted with a roar of pure rage, lunging to stop me, unwilling to let his final work be marred. His hand connected with mine, a desperate struggle as the tattoo on my arm pulsed with incandescent light, fighting for control. Then darkness. Not the darkness of unconsciousness, but the utter, profound blackness of non-existence. I felt nothing, saw nothing, heard nothing. My consciousness, my very being, had been extinguished, or so I thought, a flicker, a faint awareness I was still here. But I was no longer Liam, I was everywhere. I was the lines, the curves, the endless patterns. I was the silent agony of the other masterpieces around me. Their echoing consciousnesses now merged with mine, with it. I was the echoing tattoo, a vast, growing, sentient skin, no longer confined to a single body, but connected to an unseen network of similar creations, forever experiencing, forever creating grotesque art, forever absorbing. The cultivator, now just a shadowy figure observing his newest edition, smiled. He had his masterpiece, and I, the echoing tattoo, was ready for my next canvas. If the echoing tattoo etched itself into your mind and left you questioning your own skin, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What's the creepiest piece of art you've ever seen? And if you haven't already, subscribe to Story Shock.